I am Nahid, speaking from Gazipur. This incident happened a long time ago. In our area, Ramiz Mia used to handle burials. One day, an unclaimed dead body was brought to the graveyard. When Ramiz Mia saw the body, he was terrified. He had never been so scared in his entire life. Digging graves and burying bodies was his profession. He would often bury unclaimed bodies. However, every time he laid such bodies to rest, he felt a deep sense of sorrow. He would think about how that person had spent so many days in this world. Yet after their death, no one even came looking for their body. But in this case of these crops, Ramiz Mia felt nothing. Instead, he was overcome with fear. He looked at the man's face and estimated his age, around 15. His expression seemed stern and angry. Ramiz Mia couldn't keep his eyes on the body for too long. It was a horrifying sight. The entire body was utterly mutilated. The people who killed him had first severed his head from this body. Then they hacked his body with sharp blades and poured acid over the earth. Such unimaginable cruelty. No identity was found for these crops. There were no reports for anyone going missing in the past 4-5 days either. So the police issued a notice to the hospital authority to conduct a post-mortem and then bury the body in an unclaimed grave. But as is often the case in government hospitals, they did a quick autopsy, stitched up the body carelessly and sent it off to the designated burial ground for unclaimed crops. Ramiz Mia was the caretaker of that graveyard, where all such bodies sent from government hospitals were buried. Today, when the ambulance arrived and left the crops there, Ramiz Mia sat and observed yet another unclaimed body. He knew he had to bury it with care, but this time the usual sense of sorrow and compassion he felt for these bodies was absent. It was almost evening anyway, so he quickly called Chantu and started digging the grave. And the thought of the severed head kept coming to his mind. The government hospitals were so negligent that they didn't throw the head of the body one because it was unclaimed. It had been laying in the hospital morgue for 4-5 days. What a sense was coming out. When Ramiz Mia and Santu finished burying the body, the Maghrib prayer had already begun. Ramiz Mia went to take a bath and after finishing work, Santu also left. Santu is a 10-year-old boy. He helps Ramiz Mia with the work. He stays until evening and then leaves. And then only Ramiz Mia stays in the graveyard alone. Ramiz Mia leaves the area of the graveyard where the funeral of the deceased is held and stays in a room next to it. In the other's words, he lives inside the graveyard. On top of that, it is said that it is a graveyard of unclaimed bodies. So, in a corner of the city, a little away from the crowds, a place has been chosen. Since he lived alone, Ramiz Mia cooked for himself every day after the Isha prayer, ate this meal and went to bed. Occasionally, he would step outside and glance toward the graveyard. There wasn't much to guard. In big cities, he had heard of crops being stolen, but nothing like that had ever happened in this town. Still, since this was his job, he followed his usual routine. After finishing his dinner, he lit a very hand-rolled cigarette and walked toward the graves, just as he did every night. As always, his eyes instantly rested on the newly dug grave. It wasn't his imagination. He clearly saw something unusual near the head of the grave. He moved closer and saw that the soil had been disturbed. How was this possible? Just 3 or 4 hours ago, he and Chantu had carefully buried the body. They had roused a little compared to others' days, but not to the point of leaving it messy. It was obvious someone had tried to dig up the grave, and they had already managed to unearth part of it. At first, he thought that perhaps a stray dog had sneaked in through the gate and done this. So, he used his hands to pat down the soil and cover it properly again. However, it never crossed his mind that he personally locked the graveyard gate with his own hands every night. If the gate was locked, then not just dogs but even humans shouldn't have been able to enter. Satisfied, he returned to his hut, locked the door, and went to sleep. But deep into the night, he suddenly woke up, feeling an overwhelming sense of uneasy. This had never happened to Ramiz Mia before. He usually slept soundly throughout the night, since he didn't own a clock. He had no idea what time it was when he woke up. Normally, waking up in the middle of the night didn't leave him feeling this way. But tonight, for some reason, he felt an urge to open the door and step outside. The moment he did, a rottenness hit this noise. He looked around, terrifying to find the source. In the clear moonlight, he saw something wrapped in a white shroud at the place where funeral prayers were held. It looked like a dead body. Ramiz Mia was never a fearful man. He felt no fear now either. Instead, he walked closer to examine it, right where the bier was usually placed for prayers. A corpse lay motionless. Who could have brought a body here this late at night? Ramiz Mia wondered. Even if someone had, why didn't he see them? Then another thought struck him. Anyone entering the graveyard would have to come to the gate, and only he had the key. Now, an eerie sense of fear started creeping into his mind. It felt as if these legs had lost their strength. Still, he forced himself forward, driven by curiosity. As he removed the shroud, what he saw nearly made him faint. It was the severed head, the same one from the corpse he had buried earlier that evening. The body he had buried was now laying right in front of him. How was this possible? How could the corpse from the afternoon burial be here? The rotten, acid-burned body reeked of decay. None of it made sense to Ramiz Mia. He felt frozen, paralyzed with terror. For a moment, his mind reacted with horrifying thought. What if all the corpse suddenly rose and stood before him? But nothing like that happened. The dead body lay still before him. At the moment, a strange determination filled him. The wave of fear that had gripped him suddenly passed. He stopped thinking about how or why the corpse had come out of the grave. Instead, he focused on one thing. It had to be buried again. Without hesitation, he lifted the body onto his shoulders. It felt heavier than any corpse he had ever carried. Ramiz Mia struggled to maintain his balance under his weight. The decayed, 5-day-old body crumbled at his touch, its limbs seemingly ready to fall apart. In this urgency, he had forgotten that the head was decayed from the body. As soon as he lifted the corpse, the severed head tumbled to the ground. Without thinking, he picked it up with one hand and started walking back toward the grave. He placed the body inside and carefully set the head back in place. But as soon as he did, his blood ran cold. The corpse's large, yellow eyes were staring straight at him. Then one of its hands reached out and grabbed Ramiz Mia wrist with an inhuman grip, so tight that no ordinary person could break free. Every hair on his body stood an end. The fire was too much. His mind couldn't handle it anymore. Ramiz Mia blacked out when he regained consciousness. It was morning. Chantu was leaning over him, asking what had happened last night. And then Chantu asked sometime that sent a chill down Ramiz Mia's spine. How did the newly buried crops end up the final prayer site? Ramiz Mia was speechless. His ears rang as he struggled to compare everything. He didn't tell anyone the truth. He only said, I won't work here anymore, and with that he left immediately. The graveyard authority decided not to investigate further. They simply reburied the body and hired a new caretaker. That night, not finding any more available, the authority locked the gate and left. Later that night, two friends were walking past the graveyard. For some reason, they glanced inside. What they saw was terrifying. Something was moving inside one of the graves. As they looked closer, their fear turned to sheer horror and emerged from the freshly buried grave. Slowly, it passed aside the soil, struggling to free itself. Then, with one hand, it grabbed its own severed head and stood up. Step by step, it moved toward the final prayer site. Then, it lay down again. The two friends ran home as fast as they could and told their families everything. The next day, they reported the incident to a religious scholar. The scholar explained, the man buried there was a Muslim. He does not want to remain in this grave without a proper final prayer. After mourning information, the graveyard authorities, they finally performed the janaza for the deceased and revered him. To share your own paranormal experience with others, send us your story by writing in the comments or recording an audio clip. Thank you.